we're opposite. That's all right. I'm Kristen. That's Ann. Hi, everybody. So my name is Kristen Freer, and I oversee the client onboarding process at PerformLine. So I work closely with client brands to update their compliance practices and process to include PerformMatch. And why has that been kind of growing a QA practice has been a priority, especially for contact centers in the last couple of years? Because they realize that knowing what transpires between an agent and their customer and ensuring that their agent is adhering to quality and compliance guidelines is critical, paramount to success. And in this session, we're going to hear how one contact center, On Deck Capital, matured their QA team and process over the past year into a successful operation that is improving service quality, but also reducing costs, and that's something we'll talk about. So here from On Deck to help tell our story is Ann Blakey, Manager of Contact Center Operations at On Deck Capital. And since I know Ann doesn't love to talk about herself, I will give a quick bio and background that she has been working in the contact center space for 20 years now, so she has worked in many roles, everything from an agent to a staffing analyst to workforce management to dialer administration. So she completely understands all the moving parts that kind of feed the motion of a contact center. So, and a quick fun fact, Anne shares her birthday, was born on the same day as her daughter Lucille, right? Mm-hmm. Lucille, and the scary part is that's Friday the 13th. So ultimately, I guess I'm just saying that you guys are both cursed. There you go. So, blessed. Yeah, blessed or cursed. So now for the real content, our big first question. So Paul spoke to, how does it feel to be a 2016 Kraken Award winner?
Very nice, thank you.
Very nice, thank you. So let's dive into what you did to earn that award, actually. So I'll just start simply. What was a year ago, what was QA like at On Deck before you started working with PerformMatch?
Yeah, so QA was, it existed, at least theoretically. We had a vendor that manually reviewed a certain portion of our calls. Their services is we literally sent them, a section of calls, and they had, a handful of people go through these calls and look for anything that was, very outstanding, very easy to notice. They really didn't have an understanding of our process or why we were asking what we were asking or saying what we were saying. And the feedback would come back very slowly. Mm-hmm. Most agents wouldn't get a call reviewed or any feedback on it over the course of 6 months. Some wouldn't even get one in a year. So it was a very minimal amount, and a lot of our agents didn't even realize that we had a QA process.
So I know, so you went from a manual agent partner to automation, and is that the primary driver as to why you went with automation over a different manual partner? Was the volume opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. Automation, there had to be a technology solution to it because we needed a lot more than we were getting. Yeah. And to staff that many people ourselves, yeah, or to hire a vendor to do that, it wouldn't have been cost effective. So technology was really the best solution, and we were able to make a drastic difference in what we were able to QA.
So were you worried, this is kind of an onboarding question since that's where I come from, but were you worried when you made the decision to use a technology company that the implementation was going to be this drawn out, costly process?
Yeah, I think anytime you're buying into a technology, there's that concern, like how are you going to make it fit in your world that you have set up? But that was a lot of the questions that we asked up front. And so the implementation was actually very simple. And the fact that it integrates along not only within our systems, it had to integrate with our dialer to feed the recordings in there. And I was very impressed with how simple it really was. Within a couple days it was set up and we were, in there building rules.
So now that you're a year, I guess 9 months about in now, can you speak specifically about how the service is helping you guys?
Yeah, so I think with QA, there's a couple of different pieces to that. The first level is compliance, and then the second nicer level, I guess, is the QA part, like how you're really treating your customers. And with us, we were able to evaluate a true percentage of our calls. And there are certain compliance regulations that apply to our call center and the kind of work that we do. So we were able to improve our compliance. We've been able to address multiple different compliance things that we didn't even realize that were going on because of the volume of calls we were able to evaluate.
So to come full circle on that sort of primary objective when you're speaking about compliance was, well, not just about compliance, but was to surface more findings, more actionable findings for all your agents. How far have you come? Do you feel like?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a completely different world. Like I said, there was agents that didn't even realize that we had a QA process in place. And we're to the point now that we have 100% of our agents that get a call reviewed at least every month. And most of our agents, 92% of them, get at least one coaching opportunity out of those calls every month. So it's a drastic difference. It's a drastic difference for the operations side of it and the things that we can do for that, but the agents are vested in it now. Like, they're getting feedback and they're able to do something with it. So it's definitely good for them. Even 69% of our agents get multiple coaching opportunities, and that helps the managers trend certain things. But on a larger scale, we can work with our training department to address larger issues. Like, if there's something that we hear consistently across 50% of the calls that we're evaluating, then we can go back to our training department and really work the full circle. They can retrain the teams, and then we can evaluate the effectiveness of that training on what's coming out after it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How have the agents, this is kind of a big question I hear at a lot of call center conferences that I've been to in the past, is how are the agents responding to this increased scrutiny?
Yeah, when we first told them, we're like, oh, we bought this speech-to-text software, and we're going to evaluate all your calls. It's like, it's the big brother reaction. They were concerned at first, but I think once they started seeing the output and the feedback they were getting, and then on top of it, what their managers are able to get out of it too. The managers get so much more effective feedback to give to their agents that they are finding that it is in improving their sales and their own processes and easing some conflict on some calls. And so we are now having very positive reactions, and the agents are excited to get the feedback, and they respond instantly sometimes with, oh, I'm going to do this differently next time, and that sort of thing.
So sort of speaking of it being part of kind of a new agent training module, how are you getting the feedback? Like, is the I think we talked a little bit about how you've sort of pushed our product a little bit to work for how you wanted to communicate to the agents. So I believe because this sort of happened after onboarding, but that you guys are using what we used to call as our vendor portal as an agent portal to communicate directly with the agents.
Yeah, we really wanted it to work, not only for the managers to be able to access it, but we wanted the agents to be just as vested in it, and so they could have an active participation in their compliance and their QA. These are their customers as much as they're our customers, and so we asked for something that our agents could use, and asked for Formline to kind of modify what they had to make it work for what we needed. And the agents all have access, and they can respond to any feedback on any calls, and that stays tracked within the system. And so it's much easier for managers to trend things, like I say, or even agents go back and reference some calls. If they're a month down the line, they're like, wait a second, I adjusted something last month. What was? And so
awesome.
they'll go back and reference them as well, which is very nice for them. They can all access all of their own calls.
Yeah, it's really refreshing because I'm speaking later about vendor portal, about how many of our clients are monitoring their third-party affiliates and using the portal as a way to communicate to the vendors and track all that sort of remediation activity in one place, but to use it for agents was a really smart innovation for you guys to push it, and now other call center clients are taking advantage of that as well. So I remember during onboarding, though, that there was, beyond the primary objective of increasing volume, that you had mentioned to me you'd love to be able to use the tool to gain knowledge about what makes a call productive or useful. And so we've been talking about using the analytics as a way to give individual training opportunities, good and bad, to showcase good and bad as training opportunities for agents. But there's obviously that adds up to a lot of data in our system.
It does.
So how have you over time been able to use that multiple data points?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a growth process over the last 9+ months. You know, we definitely started with implementing the solution, figuring out what we were getting out of it, what we could build into it. You know, I did the initial setup of that and like kind of got it off the ground, and then we hired a full-time employee to go ahead and, you know, like do the QA part of it, you know, and figure it out, you know, get more in detail. And so then it was a lot of work on finding out what rules we wanted to evaluate, because we have multiple different call types and we can apply different rules to different call types. And that was very important because we have some drastic differences. And and so then we got to the point where, you know, our rules were very accurate and we were getting out of it what we wanted, but we still have one person that's sitting there, you know, and there's a lot of flags and a lot of volume coming out of it. So there's only so much one person can do. And in the process, I kind of see it as 3 different layers. The first layer where Perform Match took off the layer for us, because it's evaluating the volume and all of the little things that are easy to pick out that we could program into rules. The second layer is somebody looking at the ones that are flagged, you know, any rules that are flagged. And then the third part is actually, you know, providing the feedback to the agents and working with our compliance team and working with the training team to get it to loop back around. And so we were at this point where Ryan was spending all of his time, you know, like just looking through the calls and the flags and not as much providing the meaningful feedback. So needing more, we, you know, reached out to Performline and got professional services from you guys. And that allows us to get that volume, that's the personal touch that's kind of needed on top of the technology. So we have a team through your pro services that evaluates our calls. The difference with this team of humans is that, like, we were involved in the training of what they're looking for. We put them through the same training that we train our agents on and that our trainers go through, so that they knew why they were listening for certain things and what they were listening for. And then it was a feedback process. You know, we would get feedback from them. Ryan would get it, and he'd be like, "Okay, well, that's almost right. You know, let's go." And it's a partnership, you know, and it's almost like having another QA team, but they just sit under Performline's roof.
Yeah, I know. When I spoke last year, we spoke a little bit about some of the misnomers about speech analytics, and one of them was that, we talked about this beforehand, was that, you know, speech analytics is sort of a set it and forget it solution, and that it's this amazing technology that will just, everything that it finds is absolutely, you should just go fire an agent because of something it found. And obviously that's not the case. And so part of onboarding with Ryan, the person your QA person that you hired, was to normalize the results to a point. But then it was, once you did that, it was still a ton of volume. So I know that we were able to help.
Yeah, it was definitely a ton of volume. And it is not a set it and forget it thing. It is a tool that you use, you know. And there are some things like, you know, the easiest thing to always reference is the recording disclaimer. You know, like on every outbound call, there will always be a requirement of the recording disclaimer. But as the industry changes, you know, like we can trend out different competitors. And if we see a spike in a certain competitor, we can go and investigate why this competitor is being mentioned on so many of our calls. Is it our agents or is it our customers?
Right.
And, you know, we can get a lot out of that. So it is something that continually changes on a weekly basis, sometimes depending on what is going on. And it has the flexibility, though. We can put things in, we can take them back out if we don't need them. And we can really use it as a tool to continue to drive the business.
So back to the useful, to sort of the useful and productive call comment that you made to me in onboarding. So, you know, beyond the low-hanging fruit of compliance violations that speech analytics can easily recognize in terms of banned language and the absence of required language, have there been some trends that you've seen that you don't necessarily have to identify, but just the concept of trends that you've been able to use as training opportunities with your agents besides just compliance fines?
Yeah, I mean, we all know like the high performing agents in our center, and we go and we look, there's a golden thread through those high performing agents, and so you can go and you can evaluate their calls and what are they doing differently. You can kind of evaluate both extremes of the scale and
Right.
what is the difference and what is the difference that is a trainable difference, and so yeah, we've definitely identified trends with our high performing agents, and sometimes it's just the way that they're talking about the product, and sometimes it's an education about the product, and so we can again work with the training team to train, and then we can measure the results of that training on the other end when more calls come in, because it's very much real time.
So have you been, this is actually a genuine question, I don't know the answer to it in any way. Have you been, post onboarding with our client success team, have you been adding rules to the mix that are non-compliance rules?
Yes, a ton of them.
Okay.
We have a whole call flow, like any call center, I suppose, but a whole sales process. And, we've worked in very creative ways. Ryan and Mike Murphy, work a lot of hours every week at finding ways like to look for the things that we're looking for. Okay. And sometimes it's keywords, sometimes it's phrases, and sometimes it's something that the customer has to say that would then cause a reaction on our agent's part. So they have, I may have started with 50 rules, and there's probably 250 now, and some of them just various rules. And they don't all apply to every call type or every even department. And so there is the flexibility to kind of move them around and make sure they only apply to what we're really looking for.
Cool. I did not know that. Thanks, Mike. So obviously, it's still a year in. I know that you guys are continually growing. We just talked about some growth going on. So I know that you're continually growing. Alongside that, you're continually growing your QA practice. So what's kind of on the horizon? What's next for you guys?
Yeah, I always joke that we're going to slowly take over the world within On Deck as far as compliance goes. The next step for us was, okay, we had our calls being evaluated, and we're getting very proficient at making sure we have a directional knowledge of where our compliance is. We're able to work with legal and compliance for training issues and that sort of thing. And so the next point of contact with our customers is via chat. And so it was like, okay, Performline, I need some way to evaluate my chats, and hey, guess what? They're already in writing, so this should be, pretty simple. But there's other complications that come with that. The way people write in chat and misspellings, and there's all sorts of complications. So we needed a solution for that, because I need to ensure that there are certain compliance points being met within our chat contact with our customers as well. So we have implemented the Chat Scout, and we are now evaluating 100% of our chats at this point in time.
And do you think that it's, I've heard from some other clients that are working with Chat Scout as well, that they feel like it's enabling them to grow chat within their organization?
Yeah, so our projected growth within chat is pretty drastic over the next year, and so my point was that right now it is at a manageable level where we can evaluate 100%.
Yeah.
And we didn't really have a whole lot of idea about what was going on with the chats. We knew what came out of the other end when it came out, but nobody was sitting there reading the transcripts. And so we are able to now measure what is going on and what is effective and what is not before we scale it up to something that would have been much harder to correct at that point in time or to improve. So we're really like honing it in, getting it right where we want it, and then over the course of the next year, it's going to grow drastically within our organization.
Chat is. That's what I've heard from a number of people. Awesome stuff. I think those were all my questions for you. That's definitely Kraken-worthy, awesome stuff. So we don't really have time for QA, but if there's a takeaway today with what we've learned from On Deck's growth with QA over the past year, is that yes, your contact center QA absolutely needs to service your business with compliance, like we talked about, but you may find in doing so that you end up servicing your agents with the training that they obviously need, but they're craving. And in a happy agents and well-performing agents obviously translates to ultimately servicing the customer with a better, a more optimized experience. And so we talk a lot today about the culture of compliance. I feel we've heard of that a lot today. And that kind of is a trickle-down effect. I mean, it definitely has a trickle-down effect that can positively affect your brand, but to some of the things you spoke about today, also your bottom line. So, like I said, I don't think we have a lot of time, actually any time, for questions. But if you have any questions, I know Anne's going to be here for the wrap-up part of the wrap-up party upstairs later. And I actually think that she, today, just for today specifically, dyed your hair purple so that you could be found easily. Was that so?
Yeah, well, it complements the green,
Yeah,
so I had to
it
go
does.
with it.
It works well. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Anne.
All right, thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.